Now, one of the most important things to look for when it comes to building a fantasy football team is those one or two bargain players that allow you to fit in all of the best players that you want to pick. And in this video, I'm going to talk through the best cheap players in the Euro 2024 fantasy game. I just wanted to caveat things before actually getting into the players themselves by saying some of the players in this video are a little bit risky. Some of them definitely nailed to start for their respective teams and should do just fine, but some of them are a little bit risky, and I'll cover that when I actually go through them. I'll start off with Mittelstadt of Germany. I think at the moment he appears to be the most promising of all of the cheap players in the game. 4 million euros, which is the cheapest price you can actually pick a player for. And I think he's going to start at left back for Germany. He's got only Raum for competition, who are out and out left backs. And Raum didn't actually play for Germany during any of the Euro qualifiers. He's obviously, like I said, the cheapest starting defender in the game, in my mind. And he's playing for the host team Germany, who of course have a really good group. Germany in general, right? They're in great form internationally. And they've got, a team in the Champions League final, a team that have gone undefeated pretty much all season, only got defeated in the Europa League final, then Bayern Munich, who made it to the Champions League semi-finals, right? Germany are really strong. He's got 2 goals and 4 assists in the Bundesliga. I believe he plays for Stuttgart domestically. He should also, I think, be fairly decent for ball recoveries. I really like him as an option. I think he'll do decently from an attacking perspective. Like I said, should do okay for ball recoveries. He plays for Germany and he's only 4 million. I really like Mittelstadt. He's in my team at the moment, and I think you should consider him for yours as well. Next up, we've got Maatsen of Holland. He is sort of predicted to start at left back / left wing back for the Netherlands. I guess it kind of depends on what formation they line up in. They've got the likes of Ake, De Ligt, Van Dijk, to name a few centre backs. So in my mind, I think they play a back 5, and Maatsen likely, in my mind, gets a start at left wing back. He only really has Daley Blind as competition for that position, and Daley Blind has played quite regularly for Holland internationally in that position, but he's a Champions League finalist, had a fantastic season for Dortmund. I just don't see how Daley Blind starts ahead of this guy. Let me know in the comments what you think, but in my mind, I think Maatsen has got a pretty good chance of starting for Holland. And at 4.5 million, he's great value. I think he offers a little bit of ball recovery points chance. And we all know how good he is going forward, right? And how decent he has been defensively for Dortmund. 4.5 million makes him probably the cheapest defender you can sort of almost rely on, I guess, for Holland. Obviously, we kind of have to see, I think, come the friendlies before the Euros as to who starts in that position. If it is Maatsen, though, you've got to think he plays in the tournament itself, and he's got to think he's a good option. All right, then next up is a player who I think is going to be a bit of a differential when it comes to actually picking players in the game, just because I think he's a midfielder and there will be more sort of face value, like attractive options, I guess. It's not to call Souček ugly or anything. 40% of all goals in international football come from set pieces. I think that's a really important stat to have in mind when picking players, not just your cheap players, but any player in general, right? So I think players that both take set pieces or are likely to get on the end of set pieces are going to be really good options. And Souček, in my mind, he's genuinely one of the best players in the world when it comes to getting on the end of and scoring from set pieces. We know how he is for West Ham, right? He's an absolute animal in the box for scoring from corners and free kicks. He should be nailed on to start for the Czech Republic. Like I said, I think he's going to be a bit of a differential, Souček is not going to be the first name on most people's team sheets, but I actually think he's going to do decently. And also, when you're a threat from set pieces, I don't think it really matters how good your team is. I don't think Czech Republic are necessarily the strongest side, but as long as they get set pieces, I think they can be threatening. And I also think Souček is going to be really good for ball recovery points. He has been in European qualifiers. We all know the kind of role that he picks up. He's decent for tackles, certainly for West Ham in the Premier League. And I think he's going to be decent for tackles for the Czech Republic too. So I think the guy's got plenty of routes to points. I think he's probably going to score a couple of goals during the tournament from set pieces. And he should be good for ball recovery points as well. And he's going to be a differential. All of that for 6 million, which compared to other midfielders in the game, I think is a really decent price. So Thomas Souček, I think, is going to be a nice option. Next up is more of a player to keep an eye on than actually nail on in your team at the moment. But Brice Samba, the backup goalkeeper for France, is definitely one to keep an eye on. Maignan, I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. Forgive me if I've butchered his pronunciation. He's France's first choice goalkeeper and he's dislocated his finger. Typically, a recovery from a dislocated finger is 4 to 6 weeks, which means he could be back in time for the knockouts. But could he miss the group stages? I think that's the question. If Maignan looks likely to miss the group stages, ultimately, when you're picking your players in your Euros team, right, there's unlimited transfers in the round of 16. And you'll probably want to use a chip at some point during the group stages, maybe match day 3. So in reality, you're picking your team for 2 or 3 games. And could Samba play the 3 games of the group stages? That's the question I'm really asking here. Obviously, we need to keep an eye on how Maignan gets on with recovering from his injury, etc. And also, just how Samba stacks up with Areola for the second choice goalkeeping position for France. We'll get some more information during the international friendlies ahead of the Euros. I think, you know, the guy who's likely to start the Euros for France in goal is going to play those friendlies, right? And it's just whether it's between Samba or Areola. I think it's going to be Samba. He seems to be a little bit more favoured by Deschamps than Areola is, but, you know, who knows exactly. But we'll get the friendlies to work that out. I just think, with France's first choice goalkeeper being injured, I mean, we all know how strong they are and the names they have in defence, right? I think they're going to be pretty solid. 4.5 million for a France goalkeeper that's likely to start. You can't really say no to it. It just depends who out of Samba and Areola are actually going to play. Xhaka is actually in my team at the moment, my first Euros fantasy draft, and I really like him as an option, but it kind of does depend on whether Shaqiri plays. I think we'll get a bit more info again in those friendlies ahead of the Euros as to exactly how Switzerland line up. If Shaqiri's not in the team, Xhaka is going to take all the set pieces. I'm not 100% sure if he's on penalties, but he will take the corners and free kicks at least. And as we said when talking about Souček, 40% of all goals in international football come from set pieces. So it makes sense to bear in mind having those set piece takers, or the guys that get on the end of them, in your team. And I think if there's no Shaqiri, Xhaka is a good option with that in mind. He averaged 7 ball recoveries per game in qualifying. You obviously get a point per 3 ball recoveries. So that means, you know, he's getting 2 points for you basically every game if he keeps that up during the Euros. I mean, he's absolutely nailed on for Switzerland. I'm 95% sure he's the national team captain now as well. So I think that just increases his nailedness, right? He has been absolutely unbelievable for Leverkusen this season. And I think that confidence that he's had throughout the season, of course, barring the Europa League final, I think he can have a really big tournament. I just have a feeling that he's going to score a fair few from outside the box as well. He's just that kind of player that I think is going to show up in the Euros. So I think there's a bit of, you know, real factual justification, the ball recoveries, the set pieces, etc. And then also just a gut feeling for me that he's going to have a strong tournament. I really like Xhaka, and I think 6 million is a really good price. And finally, this is a little bit boring, I'll admit, but Lang is pretty much as safe as houses as you can get for a starter in a team for 4 million euros. Played 7 out of 8 games in qualifying for Hungary. He's obviously not going to light the world up, right? He's a 4 million defender playing for Hungary, so don't expect the world from him. But he is a 4 million player that I think you can pretty much guarantee is going to start all the games. He's got 5.8 ball recoveries per game in qualifying. You know, that could be 2 points per game in the Euros if he keeps those numbers up. And I would say Hungary really play up to the occasion in recent international tournaments. We've seen how well they've done in previous Euros, and they could well continue that again, and who knows, maybe keep a few clean sheets. Lang, I think, is the safest 4 million option. We've obviously spoken about Middlestat, who I think has obviously the highest upside. But if you want to go safe and secure, I think Lang is your man. Alright, and that's the end of the video. Now, I'll admit, there isn't a whole lot of dirt cheap midfielders and forwards in this video. In fact, I haven't even spoken about a single forward, but I'm not going to talk about players that I don't believe will do well. I don't think there is a midfielder below sort of 6 million in a cheap forward that are actually worth picking. I think the way to play this game at the moment in my mind is to pick some cheap defenders, maybe someone like Xhaka and Souček to complement your midfield, and then pick some of the more expensive midfielders and forwards to fill out the rest of your team. In my mind, I just can't recommend any of the real cheap midfielders and forwards and say with any certainty that they'll serve you well in your team. I hope you can appreciate my honesty there. I'm not going to make content for the sake of it. But hopefully the players I've mentioned there can help you pick a team that have got those good assets in and can score you plenty of points. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a like rate and let me know what you think of those players in the comments. You can subscribe to the Golden Goal channel, which should be right there. I'm going to create loads more content going into the Euros fantasy, so stick around if you want to see some more from me. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.